If you're an investor and you go into Facebook's ad manager and you go to what's called a custom audience and you're looking for people with a lot of money to invest, or you're looking for people without a lot of money that might lose their home, you can literally target Facebook ads by zip code and then cross-segment that by income and net worth.
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out NoteMBA.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I am Chase Thompson, joined as always by Robert Woods, and today we have two special guests. Number one, we have a gentleman that we've talked about by proxy a few times. Robbie has talked about expanding his team. We've got Tonio Bianca, which is a new person that Robbie has added to the team over there to help us with marketing operations. Just a really cool guy, an amazing person to kind of have on the team. Very excited to have you on the show today, Tonio. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And the huge guest of the day, not that you're not, Tonio, please. Just understand, is actually...
Chris is a great guest. Thrilled to have him.
Is Chris Smith. This is a guy that I've known for a very long time in the real estate space. He's a USA Today best-selling author. He's the co-founder of Curaytor, which is a social media, digital marketing, and sales coaching company. In less than 3 years, they've taken the blueprint for a book that we've actually discussed in this show called The Conversion Code, and he's grown Curaytor to over $5 million annually in reoccurring revenue. Prior to that, he's worked with two billionaires, which if you've read the book, you know this. We've recommended it to you. His first book was actually called Peoplework. It raised $73,000 on Kickstarter, 50,000 copies sold. He's been endorsed by Gary Vaynerchuk, who we've talked about on the show, the CEO of Zappos, who we've talked about on the show. I mean, he's just a really cool, amazing guy in the real estate space. Chris Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chase. Awesome intro. Appreciate that.
Well, yeah, you're a larger than life character to me. When I was first getting started in the mortgage space, we've talked a little bit about it on the show before, but I didn't know anybody in the space and I needed to get business. And so I started doing, these short technology education videos for real estate agents to gain business. And it ended up becoming this much larger thing, but it got you on my radar and I watched a ton of what you did and it was just incredible. Kind of watching you, the progression that you've had throughout the business and how good you are at what you do. I didn't actually fully understand it until you articulated it in the conversion code. So very, very cool stuff, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the big things is we live in a world where you can be sharp or you can be sharp and share. And I think there's a lot of people that are sharp that aren't sharing. So I'm just, taking advantage of that mentality that if you give away all of your best ideas, you need more.
Okay. First of all, I love that quote. But for the typical person, what is the actual payoff for doing that? Like, we obviously have this show. We're living, breathing proof that this works, and you yourself and all that kind of stuff. But for that typical person, what tangible advice or proof? I mean, right? Like, they're just like, well, this is how I make my money. This is how I put cereal in the bowl and food on the table. You know what I mean? Like, how does that actually work?
I think I think if you're going to have the most success, you're going to be driven by gratitude and appreciation. If eliciting gratitude, if people saying thank you gets a little dopamine released, social media is going to be a perfect place for you to spend time each day. But at the same time, if you hate people and you don't enjoy people, you're not a people person, you just need some people on your team.
Right.
So I think for me, it's never been about if I post X, my bank account goes up by Y. It's always just been more, I've always been, the kid that wanted to be known and, hey, I'm over here and pay attention to me. And so for me now to have, the platforms that we have like YouTube and iTunes and Facebook and Twitter and now even Snapchat and everything else, the ability for me is just kind of a regular guy to be able to use that stuff. It's a game changer. And so if you are driven by gratitude. If Gary Vaynerchuk, you mentioned him, he has a bunch of books, but one of them was called The Thank You Economy. And like, I just love it when people say thank you, because I know that builds up like a coin in the piggy bank if I may need it. But you also have to consider that if you run to social and if you run to the internet and you just go there focused on fortunes, that's not what you'll find. You know, you have to go there. That's why I would say you really don't want to optimize what you do for clicks or leads or closings. You want to optimize it for just, I know that if I get a lot of people that owe me one, right? And how do you get someone to owe you one? Could be as simple as what I did for you. Hey, there's a guy out there that's producing great content. I'll share it on my page and tag him and say, hey, keep an eye on Chase. And then years later, we're on a podcast where now maybe my book gets in front of people, but I definitely didn't help you earlier in your career so that we would do this now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the things I learned at Quicken Loans, I never forgot this, is that what you focus on is what you find. And they would say money and numbers always follow. They never lead. So a lot of that applies to marketing. It applies to social media, but also you read the book, like at the end of the day, this is a funnel that should drive sales for your business. So I'm not just all kumbaya over here, Chase.
Well, and that's a big thing, right? Like that's a huge takeaway. I mean, even we were talking about Tonio, his wife getting hooked up with Curaytor, your company. He's like, yeah, her website just went online. And he was talking about how they're driving leads, they're driving traffic. It's actually right out of the chute impacting their business in a positive way. And he's like, look, I'm chilling over here running these ads or doing this kind of stuff. And she's out there running down these leads, running down these appointments, running down these potential clients. And you know, providing the value or doing the things that you talk about is really, really important. But what I love about the way that you mentioned it, and I did not understand your true genius, was the system of it all, right? Like you literally you could put it down on a whiteboard, you know, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And it is about the relationship. It is about, you know, the gratitude and all this kind of stuff. But again, to go back to the other point, gratitude doesn't put food on my table per se, right? Like you still have to go out and produce at a certain level. You still have to go out and close.
You need funnels and friends. And most people have one or the other. And if you're a business owner, whether you're investing in notes or whether you sell software and like we do, I mean, you need a funnel. And the entire world is looking at Facebook all day. And so even if you're not going to go in and interact with your friends, at least put the funnel in place. That's why people like Tonio's wife hire us. It's like, listen, I love people, but there's people on the internet too. So how can I continue to focus on people, but not neglect my pixels? And I wanted to crack the code, Chase. Like when I was growing up, I loved playing video games. I played Contra. And like, if you would put in up, down, left, right, BA start, it would unlock all the weapons. And I sort of approached the book like that. Like, can I just literally tell people which buttons to press and it would unlock, you know, sales from the web because there are so many buttons. And I think maybe what's the beauty of the book and just all the positive feedback is what's not in the book, because there are so many things you could do right now that it really can become a race to the bottom. You can become the king of mediocrity. And what I argue in the book is that Facebook is the internet. Like if you're an investor and you go into Facebook's ad manager and you go to what's called a custom audience and you're looking for people with a lot of money to invest, or you're looking for people without a lot of money that might lose their home, you can literally target Facebook ads by zip code and then cross-segment that by income and net worth. Facebook has that data and it's fairly accurate. And so the fact that people are still in 2016 and beyond thinking about, you know, Facebook as a thing for their friends, they're just missing out. Like one of the ahas I had in the research was there's 30 million businesses using Facebook, but there are only 3 million businesses advertising. Meanwhile, there's 1.8 billion users. So that right now is like, if you could get in a time machine and go back to 99 and get ahead of the curve on Google AdWords, that is this moment for Facebook. So my advice to anybody listening, and I know LinkedIn's important for investing, but it's amazing how many of our clients come to me, they say, Chris, I work with millionaires. I work with these guys. They don't use Facebook. And meanwhile, a week later, they got a $3 million buyer lead.
Robbie, Tonio, jump in here. I'm taking notes.
I love, Chris, we've talked about the conversion code and looked at some of the stuff. And, even Chase and I think regularly throughout the week, we've already got our platform with the podcast, and we've uniquely done what we've done behind the scenes to create our funnel, which is not a traditional one, I think, to the average online marketer or even to who our average listener is. And, with that, I think, Chase, I don't know if it just worked itself out, but what do you think it is, Chase? I mean, maybe this is a better question for you about reflecting. If you look at our network, what keeps everyone else from actually creating their funnel? Or Chris, what do you see with the people you're interacting with? Like what is
time and knowledge divided by a lack of belief?
Okay. I have to agree with that because I think, Chase and I had a conversation yesterday where he wanted to start it out with that article that you talked about on the podcast for lack of education and the fact that, people weren't seeking out mentors, which, coming to a software, an SAS company, looking for help building your funnel is the same thing as looking for a mentor at a different level. And you said it's belief and knowledge. Is a lot of people are you thinking more it's they don't believe that they can do it themselves, and that's a whole different security issue, or they don't believe that the products available or the mentors that are out there that have been created to assist them are actually worth their weight in advertising, so to speak?
Well, it's a tough spot to be in a position where you don't know what you don't know.
That's something we say on the show almost every episode.
Yeah. Well, and that's the position a lot of people are like. For me, I have to just put a disclaimer. Like, I live in a little bit of a different world because the average real estate agent is like 58 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so the internet is 30 years old. And so if you were 28 or 30 when the internet was born, and let's be honest, the actual internet that we all know and love and use and mobile and social, really only about 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you were 48 when the internet was born or when social was born, you're not going to people don't like to change, especially adults. And so you're basically asking an entire generation of people that have done things one way for 40 or 50 years to do things a different way. So of course it's hard, and that's what I talked a lot about in my first book, Peoplework, was that if you're a digital native like me and Chase, we love this stuff. We don't need the manual. We don't need to go to YouTube and search how to use an iPad. What are the best apps? We just find them. But if you're a digital immigrant and you really struggle with this new language, you just have to be self-aware about that. And that's when you go out and find the mentor. It could be a mentor that's younger than you. That's one of the interesting things to think about. Maybe, and I like how Gary Vaynerchuk puts this in some of his talks, maybe the 22-year-old can do more than get your coffee these days.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very true.
So for the average person that's listening, so let's say they've been investing in real estate for 2-3 years. They've done relatively well, right? They're obviously still in it, right? And you were talking about, you can go into the ad platform. Now, as a caveat to this, we've talked about the book on the show before. We're probably going to reference it again in the show. You talk heavily in the book about Facebook advertising. So there's a little bit of a disparity if you don't know quite some of the stuff we're talking about if you're listening, just as an FYI. But they go into the back-end ad platform. They break out some of these audiences. They break out some of these demographics into, groups that they can actually create ads for. They can actually advertise to. Mm-hmm. Is that the next step for them? Right, they're fairly seasoned. I mean, everyone's going to be a little different, but is this where you see the typical real estate agent? Right, you got Tonio's wife. She's doing well with her business, but they're now starting to do some ads on Facebook and what have you, and finding a ton of success. So is that for the average person? You mentioned 3 million are the only ones advertising. That opportunity sounds so huge. Is it just that simple?
Well, the devil is in the details with Facebook ads. But to answer your question, yes, you want to go into their demographic tool It's inside of Ads Manager. And I call it the magic million. That's what you want to start with, which is everyone who would have a pulse who might buy or refer you business. And that could be geographical, that could be national, depending on your company. But one of the things I think is important to talk about, Chase, is like, what is the average revenue or what is the average earnings per deal? Okay. And because if your guys are flipping houses or taking notes or taking over loans that are going to go into default or whatever it is, if that nets them 5 figures or more or several $1,000s per deal, then the beauty of Facebook ads is that you'll almost never spend more than that to get a deal.
Yeah, it'd be hard, right?
it would be very difficult. And that's why somebody like Tony's wife is going to do well, because we might get her 300 leads before we get her first closing. And those leads might cost like $10 a lead. You know what I mean? That's like $3,000. But she probably is going to make like 14 to 18K. So a lot of it is about, one, what is your, if you sell pizza, this might not work, Chase. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think we're in a similar spot, right? Like to the traditional either mortgage banker individual or, real estate agent or whatever, every closed deal tends to be in that range. We have a longer sales cycle, to use that terminology or that vernacular there, in, if we buy a deal, we buy a note, it's got to be foreclosed on, it's in a, we've got our 30-day mail, that's, all these different timelines that end up happening, right? So let's say it's somewhere like Florida where it's going to take 12 months to close this deal, to officially be out of the deal, it sold as an REO, and you're finally getting paid 12 months in. You know what I mean? So you will net that thousands of dollars, but the timeline is usually the issue that we have in our business with regards to some of that stuff, which just probably speaks more importantly to you. And you would talk about filling the funnel, right? Like it's that much more important, right? To fill the funnel at that point then.
Well, like if you mentioned a lot of the people who have been in the business for 2 and 3 years, right? And then the kind of compounding interest starts to kick in, right? So like your logic is perfect for your first year, but then what about year 2? At the end of year 2, you've had a bunch of people that have been through a year in your funnel. One of the things that I talk a lot about in the book is just how have you followed up in the past? And so if you have somebody in your database and you're setting up right now a quarterly call so that you don't lose touch. Maybe you're sending a monthly email or something like that with some information. Maybe you write a blog post, and that's sort of a way that you keep people engaged. The ability to also stay in front of your leads using social ads is actually a game changer, because the way that Facebook ads are priced is they're priced on how many people are you trying to reach. If you want to reach 1 million people, you got to write a big check. But let's say you're an investor, you got like 85 people that you're kind of watching, or 85 deals that you're tracking, whatever it is. Well, you can upload a list of phone numbers or emails to Facebook, and you can then boost a post just to those people. And it's going to cost you only a few dollars. So think of it as, in the past, when a lead came in, you would follow up with them with calls and email. Well, if you have a longer sales cycle, you want to definitely add another thing, which is just Facebook ads in their feed throughout that 12 or 16 months as well. You see what I'm saying? Like
completely.
Well, and the other thing is retargeting. Like I know a lot of you have probably been on a website, like Amazon is great at this. I was looking at socks the other day, and I went in, I looked at like 4 different socks. I bought 2, didn't buy 2. And the next time I logged into Facebook, there was an ad for the 2 I didn't buy. Right there. Exact sock. Like, not like come back and look at more socks. Like, you almost bought this pair, right? And that's actually a technique called pixel tracking or retargeting, which is also something that's very easy to do, where you kind of install a pixel. And when you do that, Facebook will ask you, like, do you want to target people that have been on your website in the last 30 days? Like, Amazon's not going to target me for the next year with those socks, right? But you can also change that feature and say, anybody that visits my website I want to stay in front of them for 12 months or 24 months. You can actually choose how long you can follow up. And with web retargeting and, pixeling and pixel tracking, kind of advanced. It sounds advanced. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's a game changer. I mean, we've got a tool that we use called DriftRock. It's kind of a pro tool. And what that'll do is every lead that goes into our database automatically gets synced into a new audience that sees different ads. So if we have you in our database, we don't need your email. So if you're in my database, why am I going to do an ad that captures? I'm just going to do an ad that nurtures. See what I'm saying? So there's a lot that goes into that. That's why there's a whole chapter or two, on just the Facebook stuff in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, what do you see developing off of that? Like, what are you guys working on now to bring to the market next that falls in line with this stuff with the Facebook targeting advertising?
Sure, that's a great question. The challenge once you crack the lead generation code, which is what we've done, is then you have to kind of try to crack the conversion code. And the ways that CRMs and email marketing tools, the ways that those technologies behave today, we think there's a huge upside that's yet to be tapped into. So as an example, what if you could follow a lead the way that you could follow someone on Twitter, and then every time they visited your site, opened an email, or clicked on an email, you would get a push alert that someone that you were following did something? Like, why are we more focused on our news feed than on our bank account? So what we're working on is, if you have hundreds of leads a month or thousands of leads in your database, how can you get a 15 or 20% conversion rate? And the way you do that is you have to actually not look at the bottom 90% of the leads. You actually need tools that help you bring the cream to the top. And what we've identified is that a lot of times, and you guys mentioned this, it might be a year. You might talk to someone and then it's a long time until you get paid. So what we're building right now, we're building a lot of different stuff. But the thing that I'm the most excited about is basically being able to simply say, I want to follow this lead. And if this lead visits my site, opens or clicks an email that I send them, I want to be notified immediately.
Wow.
Have you guys ever used Sidekick? Have you ever tried Sidekick or like Yesware, Chase?
No.
Yeah, so that's HubSpot's tool, correct?
Yeah, HubSpot's got a great free tool. Basically, if when you send an email, you want to get an alert immediately when they open or click it, that's called Sidekick. It's just a little plugin for Gmail.
Oh, okay. Sidekick sounds familiar, but not the other one. I believe someone sent me a text message actually on Sidekick 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that's one of the tools that millions of salespeople are using because it's just so useful. It's like inarguably useful. Like, would you like us to notify you when someone opens an email with the contract in it? Of course, right? So we're trying to take that sort of real-time insight into the visits of the website as well, into like clicked on your new, like what if you could get an alert that the person that you're following liked your most recent Facebook post, stuff like that. So we're trying to turn following up with leads into an experience that's as fun and addicting as it is to use Facebook and Twitter.
So gamifying the lead conversion process.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The key is that like with most CRMs, they try to tell you who to call. They try to give you a list. Here's your hot sheet. Here's your hot list. Here's your leads you should follow up with. And what I've learned as a salesperson, especially when your sales cycle is a little longer, the only person that's ever going to really be able to mark a lead as pending or hot or like, boiling is you. And so where the fortune we believe is at is sort of how do you bridge the gap between the conversation or the interaction that identified that they're a real customer and the closing. Because we do so much work to get them on the phone. We do so much work on the phone to convince them to work with us. And then we literally hang up and we don't have an action plan right then, do we, Chase?
Well, no. And a lot of times when we're talking with people that'll be, investors with us, JV with us on certain deals, it's, you have to nurture that relationship, right? It's in person, right? We meet for coffee, then, we follow up via email with them. And then, if you don't have that plan in place, like how many dollars are just rolling out the door, right? Like if you're struggling with capital raising, as it were, right? Within your real estate business, your investing business, it sounds to me like you might have a massive follow-up problem. Because if you're using, say, the tools you're talking about to generate the leads, you follow up with a couple of them.
The fortune is in the follow-up. And I'll give people a very specific message they can send. And this seems like it would be really good for your stuff, just because what I've learned about email marketing and nurture campaigns is that less is more. Mm-hmm. When we get a new lead, we of course send them emails and text and we call them and stuff. But what do you send them on day 45? What do you send them on month 6? Eventually it's just like, you can only pre-write so many clever messages. And also in such a real-time world we live in, it's hard to do that. So one of the most successful email drips that we use is if you just did a quarterly drip and the subject line said, checking in. And the email said, hey, John, I was just checking in to see if you need anything from me. And then your signature. We get more replies to that drip than all the clever newsletters combined. So it's really just this concept of hey, I'm still here in case you forgot me or in case you needed anything, just let me know. But because it comes out as a plain text email that has 9 words in it, it doesn't seem like something that dripped out because I put you in my CRM at Starbucks last week. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's like everyone needs a funnel for their business, but not everyone loves being in the funnel of somebody's business, right? Because you get all that crap. That's tremendous. That's huge. And I think you mentioned that in the book, right? That's incredible.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do is we want to think about appointment generation happening on its own. Once you have a certain scale of leads coming in and in mass, right? You should be able to send an email and get appointments almost on command. We did an email a couple weeks ago. I hope Tony's wife is going to send it if she didn't send it, because I know she's a new customer.
Is this the Zillow email?
Yeah. Did you guys send?
Already got about a dozen leads off it.
There it is.
Exactly. And so that's something that we couldn't have dripped out, right? How do you drip that out?
Can
that
I
just
ask,
happened.
What's the Zillow? Is it proprietary? Can I not ask?
No. Well, basically the CE, real estate agents, and I'm sure investors as well, hate Zillow because it's just so inaccurate, right? So somebody, I remember I was looking at a property and it was overnight there was a $50,000 price reduction. And I thought I had kind of hit the jackpot, but little did I know that was because it was, turning into a short sale. You know what I mean? It just made my head spin. So the CEO of Zillow sold his home for 40% below the Zestimate. So we sent an email that said Zillow is off by 40% for their own CEO's home. And we basically said, listen, Zillow's great. I know you like to use it, but they've got a couple dirty little secrets. And we linked to this backdoor page that shows how inaccurate Zillow is by area. And then the call to action, which has to be there, was if you prefer a Zactimate instead of a Zestimate, reply with your address. And but like I mentioned earlier with Facebook ads, the devil's in the details. We could have sent that same email for your wife and had 0 replies. But we wanted to make it very clear, and we put a very clear call to action, and we put a very clear reason as to why you should. And there's just a lot of that stuff missing from marketing.
That's
it's
tremendous.
Kind of the ABCs, but they get missed so relatively often.
Yeah, I think in the book, there's 7 elements of a perfect Facebook ad. So I totally get, and with email, it's almost like we all need a little checklist, almost like someone should write a book about it.
Hey-o.
No, seriously, when I go to do an ad, I'm grabbing the book. I don't want to put an ad out now that doesn't follow the code. I wrote the damn code.
I was going to say, you can't do it.
I know. Because I'm tempted sometimes, Chase, to not add a little extra overlay, right? How I talk about using PicMonkey,
sure,
or doing something like Canva. Now there's a new one that's really cool called Ripple, RIPL, and it just gives you these sort of visuals over your image for your ad. And yeah, there's times where it's I know that helps, but I also know that it works without it. But if you're going to do it and you're going to spend money on it, why not just do it right? Why not just use the checklist? Think of it like a pie. I read a great book, you guys, totally off topic, but it's called Dare to Prepare. And it was about how the aviation industry was able to reduce accidents to literally almost zero now by simply forcing their pilots to go through a checklist every single time. And they still do it to this day. You look in the cockpit, they've got a clipboard with 10 sheets that they have to check every single thing. And that sort of concept, I think, applies to marketing these days too, because we're one click from posting, but you have to, it's almost like think before you speak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys are going to take this call, probably add a pre-roll, add a post-roll, add a commercial somewhere in there. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just always go raw. You have to take a step back and maybe be a little thoughtful and strategic sometimes too. And that's what I think we do really well at Curaytor.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it too, do you think it's like originating and actually sticking with SOPs and saying, hey, this is the way we do it. This is what works. Let's not deviate from this. And not even to make it vanilla, but make it so that you don't miss one of those vital steps that makes the difference between a 11% conversion rate and a 16% conversion rate.
Yeah, like there was some data that came from Zillow where what they started testing was like, we're going to have our inside salespeople call the leads instead of routing the lead to the agent. And we're going to, do it quickly and use a script. And they went from like 15% of the leads getting an appointment with the agent to like 42% of the leads getting an appointment through an inside salesperson, just basically following the conversion code, if you will.
Any idea how much they were able to increase what they're charging agents as a result of that?
Yeah, I think your bill will be 8 times higher next quarter due to this discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Nice.
You figure 8 times, an eighth of the time spent trying to get the lead.
Exactly. So that's the idea of like appointment generation, right? Once you have a certain scale, you can actually just put, like, we have an auto SMS tool that when we miss a call or like if we get a lead, it'll text them in addition to emailing. And the text is like as simple as it can be. It's like, hey, I just got your info from Zillow. Can I call you shortly? And like 40 or 50% of the people that get that text, they literally just reply and say yes.
Perfect.
I would love for you to contact me. I'm
and
looking to spend money.
But that's what you want to think about with your technology is not how can the technology get me the lead? How can the technology also help start the conversation?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
If somebody wants to know the value of their home or what their home would sell for, we get the lead, but then we ask them immediately on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the condition of your home? You don't need to stop what you're doing every day to send that message. You know what I mean? If you missed the lead from Trulia or from LinkedIn or wherever the lead came from, like if you missed the lead and you could grab your phone and text them, what would you write? You'd probably say, hey, sorry, I missed you. Can I call you shortly? And they'd probably say yes. So just automate that. You know what I mean? I think sometimes people feel like if you automate things, it has to be like a computer wrote it. And I think this concept of like being very human with the messages that are automated is really the secret sauce.
So we talked a little bit about Tonio's website, his wife's website, like kind of coming online because she just got it started with you guys. That was a really small section of your book with regards to like how much you talked about, say, Facebook, which, like you said, you regarded as pretty much the internet. For a lot of people listening to this, I think, most of them probably have some sort of stock, say WordPress website or some sort of website, or they're building one or whatever the case may be. How important is that in a component in all of this?
Well, I think it's tremendously important because remember, the Facebook ads and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about there is meant to get them to click and go to your site.
To go somewhere.
To go to a landing page, to go to a whatever it may be, a blog post, right? And so if you think about this concept that design builds trust, like if you go to a website for a business and it looks like the website was built in the early 2000s, that matters. Like I always tell people, just go spend 3 minutes on your own site. And if you wouldn't hire yourself, you probably need a new site. And so one of the takeaways in the book, I didn't spend as much time on it, but people think that the words matter, like the copy. They spend a lot of time obsessing about, the bio and obsessing about the about page and some of that kind of copy. And design is actually what's going to allow us to build trust online. The online consumer's attention span is 8 seconds, and you can't really read a million tabs. You really can't absorb a website and what its purpose is in less than 8 seconds if it has 3 columns and 6 tabs and 5 buttons and a live chat pop-up, right? So the ideology that we adhere to at Curaytor for our site, for our clients' sites, for everything that we build is, is it building trust in the brand as it captures? Because I'll be honest, Chase, some of the highest converting landing pages from a technical perspective, they're dead ugly,
Sure.
Like that they don't have any beautiful fonts. They don't have any beautiful imagery. They just get the job done. And sometimes if you just put a box that says enter your email and hit submit, your quote unquote conversion rate goes up. But will the people that come through that funnel pick up the phone when you call? Or when someone answers the phone that comes through his wife's funnel, are they going to actually feel trust with the person on the other end as they stare at your site? So design is huge for us. I cover a ton of, critical design components that have kind of changed over the years, because you could buy a beautiful custom website 2 years ago and you'd probably want to blow it up and build a new one already. And so, I think that your home on the web needs to be optimized. It needs to capture. It needs to convert. But one of the things that not a lot of people look at is like, does it impress?
Is there a wow factor to kind of what we're doing here? Especially in our case, where people are giving us
like an ugly white form where there's no context, or do you want like 10 that came off of a page with your Zillow reviews that were gorgeous or something,
Yeah, and in our case, we're not selling Snickers bars, right? We're trying to get JV people to help, to invest with us with real estate, other things like that. I mean, these are tens of thousands of dollars, and some of the product, as it were, for their websites that I'm seeing for some of the people that would be our contemporaries.
Well, here's what you do, Chase. You go to your site and you just say, what if somebody didn't know me and they looked at my web presence, what would they guess my average deal size was?
All right. It's good, guys, good guidelines here. Just FYI, like definitely looking in the mirror at a lot of stuff.
Here's what I'm thinking. If we look at our standard market, going back to what Chase had talked about earlier, and we say it's, most likely a mid-40s to mid-late 50s professional that's getting started, where is the one place that's the easiest? And it may be Facebook, and we can highlight it again through referring everybody to picking up a copy of the book, because we definitely support it, that you would have them start if it's truly somebody that just hasn't had a background in marketing, hasn't had a background where they've kind of what you said of the you don't know what you don't know, but to where they haven't even put themselves in a position to put themselves out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my answer would actually be, the way that most people use social media is sort of a megaphone, right? They do a status update, and that is shared with every connection they have, or that's the goal, right? And what I would do is, if I didn't have a web presence, or if I didn't really have a business behind me or past clients or anything, I would use the connections that I already have on social media. That could be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, I don't care, Snapchat. And I would send them a very simple private message. So I would pinpoint 2 to 3 people a day from my existing network, and I would send them a private message on social that just said, hey, I'm working on a really important project for work. Can I pick your brain later today? And that alone, if you just sent that message to 3 to 4 people a day privately on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, you're going to end up with 2 or 3 conversations a day with people about what you do for a living. So it's kind of a pull technique. I'm working on a big project for work. Oh, what is it? Well, you get them on the phone. I mean, for our real estate clients, they'll just say, hey, we're doing a blog post. We're polling every person we know, and we're just figuring out how many people, what percentage of people are selling their home in the next 12 months. Are you selling your home in the next 12 months? I mean, it's that easy. You know what I mean? Once you're on the phone, you could do that in private messages. So that's what I would be doing, would be like going into my email list, as small as it may be, going into my Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, small as it may be. And I would use those existing platforms to get on the phone with 2 or 3 people a day and then see where that led me.
Oh, that's huge.
I think that's a great place for people that haven't done that to start. And it reduces the putting yourself out there with the private message too.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, like, there's some best practices here where, like, it's helpful if the person's also logged on to their chat tool, which, you know, there's a green light next to their name. But I literally just paste that message to 3 people every morning, and 2 or 3 or 3 of 3 respond. So then I can feel good. I got 3 appointments a day, you know, and now you can
get that little dopamine hit you were talking about.
Exactly.
Keep you coming back for more. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do it. I'll be teaching on stage and I'll drop the message, and within seconds, you know, you see the person writing back. And like, people that have read the book fall for the trick.
That's what makes it such an effective system. It's perfect. Yeah. That's huge. Anything else for Mr. Smith, either Robbie or Tonio?
I think this is a great start. I would tell you, I do think for our listeners that are eavesdropping on this conversation, that go out and get a copy of the book. If you're expanding your business at all, if you're going to hold on to 2 notes in your portfolio and it's just you doing it for fun, cool. But for all of those of you that we talk to that try to tell us you're committed to quitting your job and doing this as a full-time gig, and you want to expand how you're getting exposure in a very professional, top-notch level that you're not going to get from, you know, mailing yellow letters or putting signs in a yard or whatever else it is you've been used to, you know, from your 3-day weekend seminars in real estate investing, that this is, you know, as Chris pointed out, it's, you know, if you go back 10 years ago and get ahead of Google AdWords, using Facebook for advertising, for expanding your market, I would just tell you, know, it's go out and get the book. There's so much more depth to what we were barely able to. We didn't even skim the top of the iceberg here with what there is to talk about.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And honestly, the way I try to write the book is forget about Facebook and forget about all the tech stuff and all the acronyms that we talked about during this call. If your business needs leads, appointments, and sales, that's what this book is about. And so if you are that, you know, like that 58-year-old agent that has done things a certain way, I wanted to be very clear that, like, whether it was Quicken Loans or Lou Pearlman or Curaytor or Dot Loop or any of these ventures that I've been a part of, every business needs leads, appointments, and sales to survive and thrive. And if you're just a little bit open to thinking about the fact that there may be some new ways based on the last decade of innovation, maybe there's a new way to generate leads, appointments, and sales that I don't know yet. And I can promise you that there is. It's called the conversion code. Amazon. Pick it up.
It will surely be in our show notes, as everything else we've talked about will also be there. Chris, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. We connected forever ago, and I never would have thought we would have been in this position. And to everybody that's listening, I would highly recommend you just take whatever app you're using, just rewind all the way back to the beginning and listen again. Chris is such just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this stuff that I've got a full page of notes, and I read the book, and I've been following him for years. So thank you so much for coming on the show. To everybody else, thank you so much for listening. As always, if you need anything we've talked about, like I mentioned, head over to notemba.com, check out the show notes there. We will, of course, have at least 7 links to Chris's book, which will be great. And if you have not already, be sure to head over to iTunes, give us a rating and a review. We appreciate that very much. And be sure to tell 5 other people you know about the Note MBA podcast. We'll catch you guys next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
everyone.